All right, so
Hunter,
can you name the most obscure 2000s WNBA player possible?
is it uh, is it Nancy Lieberman?
It is.
Let's go!
Welcome back to season 2, episode 3 of WNBA Retrospect, our annual summer scouting series breaking down the pre-draft film of WNBA legends. Today we'll talk about Rebekkah Brunson out of Georgetown, who was a late first round pick in the 2003 draft. She made multiple all defensive teams, one of the best defenders in league history, multiple championships with the Minnesota Lynx. Locked On Women's Basketball starts now.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. You are Locked On Women's Basketball. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. My name is Hunter Cruse. I'm your Saturday host covering the WNBA Draft and Prospect Scouting. I'm joined today by my co-host, Em Adler. Em covers the WNBA with a focus on player development and the game within the game. Lincoln was announced as out prior to today's recording with a calf strain due to a golf injury. Just terrible news.
Golf. Turns out golf players are actually athletes too.
They are. Today, though, Rebekkah Brunson out of Georgetown. Very unique college career. I was talking to you about it yesterday. Never played in an NCAA tournament game in her entire college career. That is so rare for a WNBA draft prospect to happen. So on some bad teams at Georgetown.
I mean, not only did she not play in an NCAA tournament game, her upperclassmen years in the Big East, back when it was still a real powerhouse, not maybe as strong as today's sort of power conferences, but it was a real powerhouse. They didn't win a single conference tournament game her upperclassmen years. She played in 2 tournament games in total. Her upperclassmen years, they were both losses in the conference tournament.
As a senior, 19.1 points, 12 rebounds, 1.3 assists, 1.8 blocks, 1.7 steals, 49% from 2, 46% from 2 in her junior year. With Brunson, where does the scout start for you?
I mean, for me, the scout starts, and in some places you could make the case that it also ends at the athleticism. I think we don't see post players with her level of athleticism, I would say very often, really, honestly, at all sometimes. What she showed both on offense and on defense for me was a very unique combination of lateral quickness and stride length and coordination. It's sort of funny, and we'll get to this, it's sort of funny in context of the rest of her game, but it was everything I would say physically was very polished, very coordinated. She just moved in a way that, frankly, I don't think at any point watching either a game or a highlight of hers that it looked like anyone on the court could really come close to matching that level of athleticism. Hunter, you're muted.
Muted. But in most cases, the athleticism was actually so game breaking, which makes the finishing so surprising. It's something we talked about with Angel Reese with the 2024 draft. Is Brunson was such a high level athlete, but her finishing process for me was a little bit weird. She would take off so far from the rim sometimes. I don't know what it was. I don't know. It felt like she didn't utilize her athleticism as best as she could in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think that comes from the question of finishing process. So I think one of the things that stands out for her overall is the fact that, she knows where to be and she knows how to get there. I think that leads to, at least in my scout, really good off-ball movement. She really was able to cut into open space either for herself or she really moved well to relieve pressure on teammates. I think that latter one is really hard for a lot of players. Certainly harder than the former. And seeing that skill, I think you want skills just beyond the athleticism, obviously. This isn't any sort of groundbreaking news to anyone, but you need certain skills to be able to say, okay, even if the X doesn't work out or Y doesn't improve as much as we need it to, we have these fallback options. And I think when you for me, when you move as well without the ball as she did, that I think you sort of have a fallback there where I can say, we'll work on your finishing, work on the jump shot, but no matter what happens, we at least sort of have a little bit of thing to fall back on. We had this with actually same draft, Alana Beard, who will be mentioned a little later in passing when we get to briefly on a player who also went in this draft, maybe a little underdrafted, but having that off-ball movement, it really provides you this level of floor as an offensive impact player, both on and off the ball, that I think a lot of people don't necessarily reach. And with what you're saying about the Angel Reese comp, I had not actually given any thought to this, and I'm sure you're going to bring this up later. But yes, that is a very good sort of combination of skills there, and I think it really shows up on the defensive end as well with Brunson.
The basis of the Reese comp is just around the fact that you're betting on motor with Brunson. Mm-hmm. You bet on the athleticism and the motor. She got so many rebounds, just an absolute insane athlete altogether. I was extremely impressed, though, with just how she took up space on defense. Like, I wish we got her wingspan measurement.
Oh, my God.
Because I looked. I could not find it.
No, neither me. I have this in my notes, I break my notes up into offense, defense, and just addendums. And my only addendum for is historic vert, length, hands, boxing out. Like, I think I definitely tend to underrate rebounding when it comes to defensive rebounding, I should say, when it comes to certain prospects. Although there are times when we look at players and we can watch them and say this player is clearly, a really good rebounder for their position. Jordan Horston comes to mind from a recent draft class. And we can also look at players and say these players don't rebound at their height. Stephanie Suarez, for example. But with Brunson, I think there was a reason she was the W's for at least a couple of years. She was the W's all-time leading rebounder, despite having a minutes-wise slow start to her career. And it's because it is hard to watch her for more than a few minutes and not notice that she is just the greatest rebounder that you've ever seen. Put her at, you put her at the 4, and just the level of boards that she's able to pick up is ridiculous.
And she's only 6'2" as well.
I have her listed at 6'3".
She said she's 6'2".
Okay, everyone's listed in basketball shoes, so I'm going with 6'3". Otherwise, I have to adjust everyone else on this list.
It's still insane though. Like you would think the all-time leading rebounder for a point in time was 6'7", 6'6", and she's right. It's just motor.
I think that speaks to, like you said, motor. It speaks to outlier vert. It speaks to what certainly must have been an outlier wingspan, and also the longevity she had. I mean, this is what comes up at Georgetown, especially. This is one of the things you can glean on paper. You see it in the game, but you can glean it on paper. She's just a gamer, and not just in terms of motor, but in terms of being able to go as hard as she does for as many minutes as she does. She's on the floor all the time, and she's able to get through that. And I think like you're saying, you have these sort of ancillary skills to fall. I should say ancillary skills. You have these sort of real buffers in terms of the motor, in terms of the energy level, in terms of the awareness. In terms of the play, I think there are nitpicky things that we'll get to in the next segment. But all around, this is a player that, you look at and you say, projectable.
Yeah, my biggest worries were it's actually kind of the skill stuff. Like the touch, just kind of stuff like that. Just how she moves, like makes quick decisions. Super small things where I like the athleticism, you like the defense, you like what she can do as an off-ball mover, the rebounding, and that's a really nice bet altogether.
Yeah, I think for me, when it comes to those things, it's not easy to glean, the totality of her skill set for multiple reasons. The most obvious one being, for all our listeners, you might imagine it's hard to get Georgetown film from the early 2000s. You'd be right. We could find a game of her playing against UConn. Not a particularly good game of hers, although she did. One of the things that you notice is she really did tend to struggle against top.
That's something. Yeah, I was looking through all of the game logs, and I'm like, that is a real thing here.
Yes, and I mean, it really shows up, and that's the issue when we're talking about players of this level of athleticism, is who rely on it with their motor, is when you reach a level where you're getting matched the motor, you're getting matched the athleticism, then it comes with strong concerns about what you're able to accomplish? Where are your counters? What can you go with this? That sort of thing. And I think that makes perfect sense. That's perfectly in line with sort of the scout you're talking about. And I have some notes in terms of trying to project the player development, because we're talking about with the skill set we're talking about, you're betting on player development. But I will leave those until after the break.
All right, so let's get right to our first break, and we'll talk about her WNBA career, but we'll also talk about why did she go number 10 overall. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what you need to keep your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof rack, exhaust kits, LED lights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Before we get into what you were talking about with the player development, we go into these podcasts not knowing what each other's grades are going to be on these prospects. But one thing I mentioned was that I viewed Brunson as an easier scout, and then you viewed it as more of a difficult scout. Why do you think that is for you?
For me, a lot of it comes down to being able to figure out the sort of if-then processes of player development. And this varies, of course, significantly from team to team, from era to era, from even from the coach and the position you're working with in a given organization to the next. No pun intended. And, for me, when we're looking at other players in this class, or other players that we've done with this series recently, when we've looked at Katie Douglas, I think we talked about this last week. You see the ancillary skills, you see the primary skills, you see the bridges between, and you can see the pattern of what the fallbacks are. With just looking at my list here on the same era, when you're looking at Lindsay Whalen, I think you see what the strengths are, you see what the weaknesses are, and it's very easy to I think figure out what the possible bridges are and what happens if you don't cross them. I would say for me, Brunson falls into a very similar category as the sort of next closest, just what's it called? Chronologically on my board was Michelle Snow from 2002 out of Tennessee. This is not a comp, to be clear, but Michelle Snow is also someone who had a lot of very raw skills. For a center, really, really great athlete, surprisingly good handle, and a legitimate pull-up jumper for someone with a 5'8" wingspan. But other than that, you have these issues, whether it's really footwork in the post, converting speed to power the way she would. Actually using that length to disrupt at the rim. And I think those are not necessarily the skills for me that were the issue with Brunson, but it's a total package where I think it can go in so many different directions that it's hard for me to put a grade on it. That's the same thing I had with Angel Reese.
Yeah, the putting the grade on it was hard for me, but the actual scout, I was like, okay, I know what she's good at, I know what she's bad at, I know what it's going to take for her to be good. And like I mentioned earlier, it's a bet on motor, player development. We saw her W career. Like, that's exactly what she did. So you can see the outline of what she does become in the W. But moving to our grade on her, what's your grade for Brunson?
So at the time when I first scouted her, I scouted her last year while we were scouting Taurasi. Just because I was going through the 03 film for UConn. So the grade I originally arrived at for Brunson was a 55. I think in hindsight, that might be a little bit generous. I think given what I've seen since, I would be more inclined to give her a 5 now. But it's also, you have to account for the era. And I think, just having this level of athlete in the front court who can rebound, they're going to stay on the court, and they're going to they're really able to outplay a lot of their opponents just because of that. And I think, before I throw it to you for your grade, part of the thing for me with Brunson was specifically when we're talking about this level of athlete, when we're talking about, being able to get to that in the front court, it's how can you stick defensively? For me, she had really great angles and hedging, but she needed to work a lot on the footwork and the hip coordination against drivers when she was playing the drop finish. I thought her length was great just really, really great when she was playing that secondary rim protection position. But there just needed to be a quicker processing if she was, more than like 5 feet away from the rim. I think those things tend to develop a little bit easier, especially in this time. Then those feel a little more experiential than maybe they would be today if I had a prospect who I'd watched for 4 years and still had those issues as a senior in 2025. So for that reason, I definitely am giving her for those reasons, I definitely give her a higher grade than I would a similar player today.
For me, it's a 5, like a solid 5.
Yeah.
I just couldn't get higher, and a main thing for that, you mentioned it earlier, was her performance against big schools. Partially, my guess there would be her teammates weren't that great, so she was getting doubles.
You're telling me Georgetown in 2004 didn't have the best supporting cast?
And the other thing is, her skill set is not suited to be the main player on a team. Like you saw in her W career. Like she's the supporting player, the connector of all connectors, just do all the little things, clean everything up. Putting her in that number one option role was good at times, like she produced, but at the same time, she was extremely inefficient at the rim. The free throw shooting, she drew a lot of fouls, wasn't that great there. I see a 5. Like, this is a player that I'm like, this is a real WNBA player. If it doesn't work out, she doesn't put all the skills together, she still can't finish, she can still provide value as like a backup 4, like backup 5. She's just so athletic there.
Yeah.
But the upside there is if she puts all the skills together, the player development, you get her in the right system, she's a future all-star.
Right, and I think it's worth noting there are players we've talked about before where it's, well, if they put the skills together, then blank, but we've still given them higher grades than a 5. Again, same draft. Elena Beard comes to mind. We gave her, I think, a 6 or even a hard 6, despite, having that same line. But the issue is, it's specifically what skills are we talking about? Like you said, the touch pretty much anywhere on the court is actually terrible. Like it is a testament to how good she is as an athlete, how good she is as a gamer, how well she moves both on offense and defense without the ball and disrupts what the other team wants to do. That her level of touch at the rim on jumpers, that we can actually, look at this and still say that's going to be a very good player, despite that, because again, you don't see players create this high, I think, very often without that. I think the sort of short area handle was good enough to get away with that. But yeah, in terms of the development, those are skills, like you're saying, with the free throw shooting. For me, they didn't really project to improve much. For me, defensively, I saw room for improvement, which is why I probably couldn't get any higher than a 55. But certainly, yeah.
Beard was way more polished. Like,
yeah,
the floor was just way higher, and that's why she was a 6.
Exactly.
Moving to her W career, we'll touch on it first before we get to her W career. Why do you think she did go 10? Like, do you think this is a player where it's like actually justified if she went at the slot she went at?
Right. So here's the bit we usually do. It was Rebekkah Brunson. She played 16 years in the league. She accrues, again, this sort of, she benefits because of how basketball works with on-off calculations. This is really the only way we can estimate player value, but because of on-off, how that works, she's going to benefit a lot from playing essentially as and this is a testament to her teammates, not a knock on her. She's basically the 4th best player or the 5th best player in most of the lineups when she is starting, both in Sacramento and in Minnesota. That being said, again, great teammates will bump you up a lot when it comes to wins above replacement, but she accrues in 16 seasons 41.2 wins above replacement. Hunter, is that a lot?
Seems like a lot.
It is a lot. Yeah, that's about a 2.5 win season per year. That's about 2.5 win season on average. That translates to basically being a 6 win, a role 6 player, an all-star. And I think you can look at the career accolades and test it as well. But the players who go above her, that there's really no excuse for. Shemeka Christian, she accrues 9 wins above replacement in her career. Nicole Old, who I think is okay, we'll get there. 1 win above replacement. Vanessa Hayden, 2 wins above replacement. Shandy accrues 1 win above replacement. Ebony Hoffman, 12 wins above replacement.
Shout out Shandy Jones.
Yes, man. There's a pretty large gap here. When it comes to Brunson and everyone drafted above her. We did this last week with Katie Douglas. You can make an excuse for some of the players above her. With Brunson, Not really. I don't think there's really any excuse. I can come up with an excuse for some of these players, but in general,
My thing is, and why she probably did not go higher is it's actually probably that there's so much weight on March Madness performances and
yeah.
her never being in the big games. You had to watch Big East basketball
Mhm.
and watch non-conference games to see her against like actual good teams. And
Yeah.
there wasn't many. Like she didn't play a bunch of really good teams throughout her seasons.
And even if you're sending scouts just to the Big East tournament, you're gonna pick up a couple games that she plays.
You're watching like
She's
one
not-
game.
She's not
This
playing
is-
in the second round. Your scouts might not even get there by the time that she is playing, so you really are going off of what's on paper. And with that, you're comparing her to, again, players that are, like you said, are making
way more productive. Like way.
players who are more productive in their tournaments, players who are
Mhm.
getting to the NCAA tournament. I mean, you have we could go down the list of these players individually, but you can look at the tape of each of them and it tells a specific story. There's really no reason why she should be going that far behind Nicole Old. She really should not be going this far behind Vanessa Hayden, Shanty Jones. Maybe you could make an excuse for the level of competition with Ebony Hoffman, but still, it's a very capped ceiling. I can understand Ebony Hoffman going above her because she is a more traditional post, and you know how that's going to fit in. That's what happens for the first few years in the W. I can give an excuse for Shamika Christian. Shamika Christian was a huge outlier in terms of athleticism and size for her position. It just never really clicked outside of a couple seasons in the W. So, that's a projectable wing. But really, there's no reason why she should have gone any lower than 6th if anyone watched any of her games, to be quite honest.
Yeah, Vanessa Hayden averaged 19 points, 10 rebounds, 3 blocks, 57% true shooting in the NCAA tournament in her senior year. A lot of weight on that.
But where did she go to college?
Florida.
Go Gators. Whoop.
After the break, we'll talk about some more prospects from this class potentially. We'll also talk more about Brunson's W career. All right, so I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games and the sport stops sporting like we want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports partner of Major League Baseball. All right, so to kick off this final segment with Brunson's WNBA career.
Was Shanty Jones a Sancho Little merchant?
Shanty Jones was involved in so many major WNBA trades. I'm pretty sure she was traded for, who was it? I think she was traded for Katie Smith with the Detroit Shock.
So good Katie Smith, not washed Katie Smith.
Yeah, she was traded for a Finals MVP.
Yeah. Katie Smith was so good in Detroit and in Minnesota. It's crazy.
They really traded up to draft Shanty Jones ahead of Rebekkah Brunson.
Not
But
a
it worked
mistake I
out.
would have made.
But it worked out well. They got a good player.
In the way they did it, it worked.
It worked. With Brunson's WNBA career, you touched on it earlier, she was never a top 3 option on a team, did all of the little things. Looking at what she did in college, could you envision this career path for her?
Right. So we can go one of two ways with that, I think. The way that I'm inclined to go and the way that I know I shouldn't say most, the way a lot of people I tend to talk to about ball go is she's someone who you could call a soft 6 as a player.
Mm-hmm.
That is someone who's a perennial all-star, maybe could crack an LW team, maybe might miss an all-star a few seasons.
I think she only made a 4, but you have to consider so many all-stars on her team.
Yes, she makes 5 all-star teams, and
4,
part of the issue is, again, she has the 16-year career, but for the first basically 2.5 years, she's not even starting. That is about what we're saying with how much of a real project she was as a player. I think that she's this athletic project archetype, and I think we run into archetypes like that fairly often, and I think she is sort of the upside case for it. Like we said, with being able to identify those carrying skills that could get her there, I think is a testament to sort of what she was able to put on tape at Georgetown, and that comes true here. People can disagree when it comes to having basically a WNBA all defensive selection, first team, second team, whatever, 7 times in her career. Might be a little rich for my blood, but I definitely see why some people think of her as a role 7 player. Again, not where I go with it. But you go from these really rough early seasons in Sacramento. You watch her play, and it's exactly, I think, what you'd expect the downside case of taking just this incredible human specimen and throwing them on a W court, which is she doesn't really know what to do with her skill. She's able to move around a lot. She's able to, I think, make that cutting stick flash. And she's able to make that the sort of above average passing for the position work. She's able to make all these things sort of work a little bit to fit into, let's say, 17 minutes a game in offense for a good team. They win the title in her second year in the league. But it's not the same. But it's not the same thing as Georgetown because of these struggles with the finishing, with the jumper, and it's hard to fit in like that, especially in a Sacramento team where when you have John Wiesenhunt, their head coach, he loves to play 2 posts. He loves to play 3 posts sometimes, actually. Like Brunson, as a rookie, is legitimately playing in lineups where there's a 6'3" player at the 3, and it doesn't work well, just flat out. So it's tough fitting in there, but you get, things get going. 2007, I think, is really what you'd call her full breakout, especially defensively. And then from there, she just becomes, I would say, maybe the best sort of team rotation glue gal you can run into. And, to the accolades sort of speak for themselves when it comes to the finals appearances, when it comes to what teammates have said about her, when it comes to having your jersey retired by that team, by Minnesota. It's impressive, and I think it's the same thing year after year, which is this is a player who cuts well, who rotates really well defensively, who is able to switch, who is able to take care of a lot of glue stuff, and it's just the kind of thing that really helps make a team like Minnesota, where you have a lot of players who at that point in their careers aren't very efficient scorers necessarily, at least before they get Sill. Maybe who aren't necessarily the most standout in certain aspects of team defense over individual defense, but she really is able to be the glue that keeps them together.
Are there any current players that you see Brunson's game, or even prospects we're now watching in college, that remind you a little bit of her, besides Angel Reese, maybe?
I was going to say, I didn't give a huge amount of thought to this until you mentioned Angel Reese, but it's interesting. You see this, I think. You see this show up sometimes other things. I definitely think a sort of version of this I would call is Dariana Little-Page Buggs at Baylor. If you sort of polish the defense and take away from the offense, that kind of stands out to me. I think if you look hard enough, you can see this in different places. But I don't think we get athletes like this very often, and that's one of the reasons it's hard for me to necessarily think of one off the top of my head.
Yeah. The thing with the Angel comp I want to talk about a little bit more is the threshold you have to be as a defender, like for that player to work as like a 4, like starting next to a Rule 5, is like legitimate. And I don't know if Angel's like that level of defender. Like,
right. We were, and I think still are high on her defense, at least relative to maybe other bigs in the class. But yeah, when it comes to that, there's, I'm bullish on her ability to be a switchable, maybe not switchable, but certainly hedgeable and rotatable big in the W. But in filling that role, you have to be able to do that at a really consistent level and just doing it way more often than I think most teams even want their 4s to do.
Yeah, I think Brunson overall is an example of a player that you don't have to be some awesome finisher if you can just grab a bunch of rebounds and play hard.
Yeah, Sacramento had 2 first-round picks in that draft. They might have made a mistake with their first one, but certainly both of them turned out well for them.
Yeah, some other players from this 2004 draft
who you may or may not have heard of.
Before you go on your tangent on Lindsay Whalen, I just want to say shout out to Gia Perkins. I couldn't get a whole Gia Perkins episode. I tried.
If we had the tape, we would have.
Yeah, the thing about Gia Perkins, I don't know if I mentioned it before on this podcast. I might have mentioned it briefly. She was a projected first-round pick, got pregnant midway through her senior season. At this point, Texas A&M was like a number 1 team in the country. She gets pregnant, misses the rest of the year. They aren't as good. She doesn't play the rest of the season as well. And she goes all the way down in the 3rd round. She didn't expect to get drafted whatsoever. 35th overall pick. Played 14 years in her career. pretty much played more games than every player taken in the third round combined.
A couple All-Star seasons in there too, if I recall correctly.
Multiple All-Star teams, I believe. She might have made made one defensive team. Good career.
Probably the best 35th overall pick in league history.
I think so.
But yeah, we're already at 30 minutes. My quick tangent is you can go back and watch Minnesota from 2004. Many people watch it live. Lindsay Whalen, it really should not have been a question over who was going at number 3 in that draft. Sacramento did not need a point guard. They had Teacha. Was Lindsay Whalen a better player from day one? I would say yes. This is not meant to regurgitate the Teacha slander that happened last year, but Teacha's a very good player. But if you can leverage that number 3 pick, but clearly the best player available is Lindsay Whalen, and you either leverage that against Connecticut to trade up for that pick, or you just cut your loss and say, all right, we're taking both players. It's 2004. You can play them both together. It's not going to be great, but it's 2004. Most teams aren't.
It's 2004. You can play anybody on the court. You can play 4 centers if you wanted to.
Like I was saying, Sacramento in 2005, they're playing 3 centers at the same time. Who cares?
Just do what you want,
Right. And I think, we can look into this. Certainly, we're not going to do a whole episode on it, but I think there's a very strong case Lindsay Whalen should have gone 2nd overall in that draft as well, just based on positional value. I mean, lead the team to the finals as a rookie, as the best player on said team. I think it's pretty cut and dry that Lindsay Whalen is one of the best prospects in adjusted for era, given that you have Sue Bird, you have Lindsay Whalen, then you don't get another point guard prospect until Skylar Diggins-Smith.
Wow.
Yeah. You don't get a true point guard prospect until, I think, of this level, until basically Skylar Diggins-Smith. If we're looking at positional...
You had Ivory Latta and Lindsay Harding.
Off-ball guard.
Yeah. That's what you had. That's the guards that win the lottery.
Exactly. So you basically... That's all I'm saying. All I'm saying is Lindsay Whalen should have been the 2nd overall pick. Would have been the obvious. Could have worked. I'm wearing a Duke shirt. I take no pleasure in reporting this. But Lindsay Whalen, I think, obviously, based on positional value, was a 7 as a prospect.
Shout out Minnesota Lynx. Legends. Thanks for making Locked On Basketball your first listen every day. Join the team at the next week for continued coverage of the WNBA. We're back each week with this sicko series, WNBA Retrospect. No one else is doing this anywhere else.
No one else should.
Nah, nobody else should. Penny Taylor series may be coming soon.
It will be coming soon as I get my library card.
Make your second listen Locked On Sports Today, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Have a great rest of your week.
Wait, before we go, Hunter, would you like to tease what next week's episode is?
Tease? Who are we talking about next week?
We're going to slander the most racist player of the past decade.
We are?
Yeah. Because it's the anti-Liz Camp Age episode. That's right. Courtney Vandersloot should have gone 2nd in the draft. We are jumping ahead from 2004 to 2011.
Time jump.
Woohoo!